So let me ask you something. Can an idea, a philosophical concept, actually be dangerous? I don't just mean wrong, I mean actively harmful. We're going to explore that exact question by digging into a really challenging and, let's be honest, controversial book by the philosopher Georg Lukács. He makes this explosive claim that a whole branch of philosophy didn't just exist alongside the rise of Nazism, it actually helped pave the way.
And here it is, The Destruction of Reason. It's a dense book, for sure. So for this explainer, we're zeroing in on the very beginning, the preface, because that's where Lukács lays out his entire argument, plain and simple. He's basically drawing a philosophical roadmap that he believes leads straight to the doorstep of Hitler's ideology.
And this really gets us to the heart of the matter. It's the big question Lukács forces us to ask. Is it possible that a tradition of thought developed by some brilliant minds over more than a century could have created the intellectual fertilizer, so to speak, for one of the most destructive ideologies in human history? It's a huge, staggering thought, but that's the thesis we're about to unpack.
So here's Lukács' core argument. He's saying that National Socialism wasn't some historical accident that just appeared out of thin air. No, he claims it was the political crowning of a philosophical trend that had been developing for a long, long time, a trend that, in his view, was systematically trying to tear down reason itself.
Lukács gives this trend a name, and it becomes the main villain of his entire book. He calls it irrationalism. This is the philosophical enemy he's putting right in the spotlight.
So, what does he really mean by irrationalism? Well, for Lukács, it's not just about being illogical or silly. It's a very specific philosophical movement that purposefully lifts up things like gut feelings, intuition, and myth above critical thinking and reason. And here's the crucial part. It totally rejects the idea that society can progress in a rational, understandable way.
And according to Lukács, this irrationalism has some pretty clear traits. It's constantly talking down reason, belittling it. It celebrates intuition, but in a totally uncritical way. It also pushes this aristocratic idea of knowledge, that only a special elite can really get to the truth. And all this is mixed with a deep cynicism about social progress, focusing instead on creating powerful myths to replace objective reality.
Now, Lukács doesn't see this as one static thing. He actually charts its development as a story of decline. A story that he says unfolds in two really distinct historical phases.
And here you can really see how the enemy changes. In Phase 1, irrationalism was basically a reaction against the big ideas of the French Revolution and philosophers like Hegel, who saw history as this grand story of rational progress. But then in Phase 2, the target shifts. Now it's fighting against the rising socialist worldview, and Lukács argues that, as the opponent changed, the quality of the philosophy itself just went downhill.
He actually calls it a lowering of the philosophical level. What might have started as a serious philosophical debate, he says, just devolved into distortion, propaganda, and nasty personal attacks. Basically, as the political stakes got higher, the intellectual tools got a whole lot less honest. This timeline really puts it all into perspective. You can see the long arc that Lukács is tracing here. It kicks off with early figures like Schelling reacting to the rationalism of the French Revolution. Then it moves through thinkers like Kierkegaard, who put individual faith above big, grand systems like Hegel's. Then you get to Nietzsche, who attacks the moral foundations of the growing socialist movement. For Lukács, Hitler's ideology isn't some weird outlier. It's the final, mass-market version of all these philosophical threads tied together.
But Lukács is really clear about something. This wasn't just a German problem. Even though he calls Germany the classic land of irrationalism, he saw this as a trend that was spreading all over the world.
The key idea here is that similar social and political pressures were popping up across the Western world, and they were producing very similar philosophical reactions. These ideas were showing up everywhere, even if they took their most extreme, most potent form in Germany.
And he names some names that might surprise you. From William James and pragmatism over in the US, which Lukács saw as replacing objective truth with just, what's useful to believe, to Henri Bergson's vitalism in France, which was all about some mystical life force over the intellect. In his view, they were all part of the same global movement, all chipping away at the foundations of reason.
And this is where the real-world consequences become just terrifyingly clear. Lukács points to a French philosopher named Georges Sorel, who had this theory of myth. The idea that you can use a powerful story to move the masses, whether it's true or not. Well, that idea got picked up by folks like Mussolini, who openly admitted that was his strategy. For Lukács, this is a direct, undeniable line from an irrationalist philosophy to a fascist ideology. So all of this leads to the final, and maybe the most powerful warning in Lukács's preface. It's a conclusion that's a real challenge to anyone who deals in ideas.
And there it is. That's the core message. There is no such thing as an innocent philosophy. Lukács is arguing that choosing to side for or against reason is never just a neutral academic game. It's always a choice with very real social and political consequences. He believed every thinker is ultimately responsible for what their ideas do out in the world.
Now, whether you agree with Lukács's historical breakdown or not, he leaves us with a really tough question, doesn't he? What happens to an idea after it leaves our heads, and what responsibility do our thoughts have for the world they might help create?